Welcome back, everyone, from the break from May. It's great to see everybody. Great to see Divya as our new member.
Hi, Thank you.
And so we'll get moving. And first is just taking care of some former business. And so this only applies to to everyone except Divya, because it's those who were on the committee when the meeting minutes were taken. And this is from our last meeting before town meeting. Is there any motion relative to the meeting minutes from our May 10th meeting?
I move to accept the minutes as printed from our May 10th meeting, 2016.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, got that done. All right. Next, we'll move to reorganize the committee for the this is the FY18 budget, 2018 budget cycle. I always have to say it a few times just because it seems so far away. But I guess we're already living in 2017, so from a budget perspective. So we reorganized the committee by electing a chairman and a vice chairman. So do we have any motions relative to the reorganization of the committee?
Mr. Chair, I would like to place a nomination yourself as chair to repeat that position for us this year.
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed?
Are the candidates get?
He wants to be part of
For the robocall.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate, I'm sorry.
Well, we have a really good working relationship.
Vice chair.
I don't. I'd like to nominate that lady.
Your pocket.
She's got the really nice bottle. So she
Absolutely deserves it. Again, I'm going to repeat myself. I'll nominate Jennifer Golden for vice chair.
I second.
Absolutely.
All in favor?
Aye. Excellent.
Okay.
You will never get something like that said about you again.
And if you would pass this to our new vice chair, this is the chart of parliamentary motions. Because I know our chair is right on it,
Yes.
but
Nice.
our little gift to you.
There you go.
Very nice. Very nice.
Very nice. Can I have one? Can she have one? No, you don't have
Find another one.
Yeah, you're welcome.
No, it's okay.
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 Next, we're going to run through our policies and rules and procedures, which are reproduced in your packet. Karen is going to work through those and explain some of our explain kind of how we're set up and what our policies are and procedures are, and then we'll go through the other kind of founding documents, so to speak, of the Finance Committee, and important state laws we should abide by, just in terms of introduction and reminder, and then we'll move on with the agenda and consider if we want to have any changes to the policies and procedures. So, Karen, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, then. How are we doing with the microphone here? Good. All right. So, it's a 3-page piece of paper that you've got, and the policies and procedures have their authority from the town charter, and this charter is in your packet. It tells you which body appoints other committees. It tells you how our town officials are elected, the town administrative organization, and there are, in the body of our rules and procedures, there are references to the various sections of the town charter as support for whatever it is that we have said that they were going to be doing. So these particular rules and procedures were adopted back in, I think, 2007. We recently amended them because we thought that we should put something in for going into executive session. So we did that last year. So in this, it says what our purpose is. We, as the FinCom, review revenues. That's what comes in. Taxes, funds from the state, and expenditures, what goes out, and the budgets, how we control what flows out. Try to stay on budget. And we've got three budgets that we, just roughly three. The operating budget, the capital budget, and the enterprise budgets. The enterprises are our sewer, water, and the Stevens estate. And they are basically business enterprises. And those pots are on their own bottoms. They produce their own revenues, and they have their own expenditures. And if they happen to fall short, which they haven't, then we might be doing some appropriations. But as a town, the operating budget runs the municipal government, the school budget, the school operations, and the capital budgets run what we do in the municipalities, improving buildings, building buildings. This tends to be these tend to be projects that go out for several years, and they tend to be, we borrow for them certain time periods for them. And so that is the capital budget. We will start this year with the operating budget, which is going to be produced, the recommended budget will be produced by the town manager. And that will be coming up. Town manager is now meeting, I'm getting into the schedule, is now meeting with the department heads to see what their requirements are. And also taking a look at the reports from the revenue committee. What's the name of our? The Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee. The representative from this board will be elected or appointed to be a member of the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee. They will look at what tax receipts are coming in or expected to come in. They'll look very closely at what the projections, how were those estimates developed. And we get to meet with our financial manager in town and town accountant, Lynn Savage. And she will give us the underpinnings for her estimates. And then we look at those underpinnings and we say, how sound do we think they are? And usually, I will say always, but they are very sound. But we go through this process because there are some tweaks sometimes that we will add on that. So we will look at all aspects that have any kind of fiscal impact on town, long-term, short-term. We'll look at each and every item. As you've already discovered, under the general part, the Finance Committee at our first meeting, we reorganize, which means that we appoint or we elect a chairman and a vice chairman. Every year we reorganize. And then the next thing we do is we look at these rules and procedures, which we're going to do, and we decide whether we'll adopt them or amend them or whatever. And then I'd have to say that when this, then the Board of Selectmen, as I have indicated, the Board of Selectmen is meeting now, and they're going to develop their budget policy statement. That's what, in broad terms, they hope to accomplish in the next fiscal year. That policy statement will be out in a month, and we take a look at that. Now, we have an item here, which item 4, and it says that the Finance Committee will meet at least annually with the Board of Selectmen, and specifically during the time when the Board of Selectmen, in consultation with the town manager, is preparing its policy statement relating to the budget for the ensuing fiscal year, to discuss issues of common concern. I think that this rule is mostly observed in the breach. So we may or may not discuss that later. We will tend to meet with them later in the process, or we have done that in the past. Now, let's say that the board has a vote on something, a proposal, as a vote on a particular budget item or particular motion that is put before us. That's called an act. That's an act of the board. If you don't agree with the act of the board, you are free to say so in any forum that you want, public, private, wherever, as long as you make it perfectly clear that you are speaking only your opinion, and you don't give the impression that that is the opinion of the board at all. You make that very clear. So it's keeping the things separately. For instance, at town meeting, here's another thing. At town meeting, we all sit up, as you know, at a table on the stage, and sometimes the Finance Committee is asked questions. Usually the chairman will answer those questions, but a lot of the time, many times, a chairman may say, well, you know, Karen or Tim or Jen, or would you please elaborate? Okay, so you may elaborate if you're called upon. You can elaborate in favor of a particular thing, or shed light on that. Let's say that you, however, are not going to be speaking to shed light on it or to support it. You're going to be speaking for something else, another purpose. In that case, you leave your seat and you go into the audience and you speak as a member of town meeting. Your name and your address and the fact that you're speaking in your individual capacity. So it's we try to keep those things separate. And let's see. All right, unexcused absences. This is the excuser in chief.
Excuse?
Right. So, in case there's any question about whether the absence is excused or not, this is the unappealable, forum. It is or isn't. If you happen to have more than 4 unexcused absences, consecutive absences, you're off the board. So it's we have to have a quorum. I think the charter says that in committees of 8 or more, a quorum shall be 5. So we're 9, we're 5. If we were 8, we'd be 4. So we're 5, and we had an unfortunate situation last year in which we didn't have a quorum. So no business got done. We don't want that to happen. So we try to, Angela gives us notice that we're going to have a meeting, and if you're not going to attend, please then just by email get back to her. So that would be very nice if you did that. So,
and what we'll usually do just to make sure that we have a quorum is if Angela gets, like, say we get 3 people who aren't going to be there, so we're at risk of being at 6, she'll reach out and call people just to make sure that we double check that we have a quorum on the day before or something, so that
That's good.
So that we're sure, and we, you know, especially if we have people coming in to see us, we'd hate for them to show up and find out we couldn't conduct any business. So.
Yes, I think we had people who had shown up for that meeting also to do that. So we don't want to have that happen again. So then there's this packet of information that you, as a new member of the Finance Committee, are entitled to have. You have most of them in your packet. You have a copy of the town charter. I don't think that you've got the town financial policies. I don't think you have the reserve policies. But I think you should have a copy of the reserve policies. So it's the town reserve policies, which we're missing. There's also a financial disclosure by public officials and employees that we need to attend to. It's financial disclosure by public official and employees. And I'm really, I'm reading it, but that isn't a document that, jumps into my mind.
Right.
Let's see, what else? Oh, the Association of Town Finance Committees handbook. And Liz ferreted out, she found that handbook, which we didn't find for her. But I think you're going to be...
We put it up on Dropbox, didn't we?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's on
Let's
Dropbox.
share it
If not,
over
we do
Blackboard.
have it on CD. We have a couple copies.
You have... Yeah, Angela, can you find that that document called the Association of Town Finance Committees Handbook? Is it a long document?
It's on CD, so I've only looked at it on CD, so I have no idea how long it is, like textually, but because I've only looked at it in an online format. But if you have difficulty, let me know, because I think I still have a CD of it, and I'm pretty sure I gave. Why am I drawing up? What's with the names tonight? Patty. I'm pretty sure I gave Patty the other CDs. I think I had got several CDs of it. So, but I'm pretty sure she put it up on Dropbox. So it's probably there. We can check Dropbox.
All right, well, is that something that should we invest in printing it?
I don't know that we can. I don't think we can because it's probably copyrighted. It's based, the association did it, so I don't think we can.
All right,
We have
so
to order
then
other copies.
Are you happy?
Yeah.
Order it from.
We can order more
Mass
copies of
Municipal
it, yeah.
Association in a printed form as opposed to a
Yeah.
CD form.
Oh, I see.
I'll take a look tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, are you happy to have that online if we can't get the others?
That's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll find them.
It's kind of nice online because you
should
can
have it
search it. You know, you can search
Yes.
it by term, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, okay, all right.
We kill enough trees on this committee.
Yeah,
Come on.
that's right. We really do, and we're trying to not do that. So then, you can't hold any other appointed or elected town office on that one. We don't follow the Roberts Rules of Order strictly. So if you get a Roberts book, there are some things that we're not going to be following strictly. But we do things like we make motions. We second the motions. The motions need to be seconded by a majority of members who are present if there's a quorum. And then that becomes an act of the committee. If one of us doesn't like what the majority of the committee does, we can file a minority report. And I think the minority report can also be, when I'm looking at this, it seems as if you don't have to disagree with the finding to have a minority report. You might be able to file something that's called a minority report, but it's actually a concurring opinion. Yeah, I agree with the action of the board, but for a different reason stated. So minority reports, they get filed. They will always then, thereafter, always appear in the record with the act of the board itself on that one. Okay. Okay. The way breaking the rule. This is something that's we as a committee agree with each other that we will discuss at one meeting an issue, but we won't vote on that issue at that meeting. We'll vote on the issue at the next meeting. That gives us a chance to think about it.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the rule. We can also vote to break the rule, because it's pressing for some reason or other, really pressing, and we've got to discuss it and vote on it. And now, let's say that we do it the usual way. We don't break the rule. We do it, discuss it one meeting. We pass it the next meeting. We enact it the next meeting, and then later, a week later or something of that later, somebody decides, let's reconsider this. They bring a motion for reconsideration. Only one can be brought. And a motion, it has to be brought at the meeting right after the vote. It can only be made by a member who's absent. So if you weren't there, you can say, hey, wait a minute. I want reconsideration on that. Or by any two members, a member who voted with the majority of the voted with the majority for the that voted for the original act. So, the motion for reconsideration can be made by an absent member or a member who voted in favor of the issue on the motion to adopt the issue. So I voted in favor, but I really want to rethink that. That can be done.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
If there's an absentee member, why do we give them this advantage of reconsideration or time? Why can't we send the minutes or the discussion minutes to the person and then expected to have an answer instead of extending it? We can always utilize the time to move forward.
Right, so
That would run against
leads
open
into
meeting.
open meeting law,
Yeah.
because basically our deliberations need to be public. So if somebody, somebody may be absent from a meeting and wish to reconsider an act just to revisit the debate and maybe make, a point that wasn't able to be made, because they couldn't do that. They couldn't do that electronically among a quorum of the board, because that would violate open meeting law. So you could, I think that's the main reason behind reconsideration.
The minutes do go out,
Okay.
but what you can't do is get back to whoever sent the minute and say, I vote for that or something, because that's open meeting law, I guess.
Right.
You just simply can't do
You
that.
have to vote in open meeting.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing: these motions for reconsideration are not done lightly. They should be done only when there's new material, there's new facts that come in that kind of put this thing in a little bit different perspective. That type of a thing. Now, if you've done a break the rules type of action, you considered it in one meeting, the issue, and you voted it on one issue, because you decided to break the rules, then in the following meeting, it will take two members to have a motion for reconsideration on that one. I don't recall any motion for reconsideration since I've been on the board, so that's what, 4 years, 5 years, something like 5 years, yeah. So, at any rate, there can be some situations like this. All right, I'm done.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
you.
That's very good. Okay. You covered most of the relevant portions of the town charter, but it's there for you and it explains how it goes. And then I'll have when we talk about the organization of the town, Tim can talk a little bit about how that relates back to the town charter, but I don't think, because so much of the charter goes to how the organization of the entire town, we don't really need to go through the entire thing. I would just say that, in general, it sets out our quote-unquote power, and our power is the power to recommend or favorable action on a budget item, unfavorable action on a budget item, or to offer another, amount on any particular line item. So that is basically the power of the finance committee. Sum total. We're an advisory board, and we're right at the intersection of being influential and irrelevant. So it all comes down to basically how influential we want to be, I would say. So I'll let Tim talk to the rest of that.
So our
Oh, no.
recommendations can be favorable, unfavorable, may be accepted or discarded, right?
Right. So we could say at a town meeting, like, we recommend unfavorable action on this item. We think that this is an unwise use of town funds, and the town can come back and say, we disagree with you.
Okay.
Or we could say, we recommend favorable action, and the town could come back and say, no, we don't want to pass it. Town meeting is the ultimate arbiter of all these items. And so when we go to town meeting, that's where the budget is decided. Pretty much in its entirety, or absolutely in its entirety. The amounts that come out of town meeting are the amounts that, the town is authorized to spend and borrow against for the next fiscal year.
I think it would be good if you had a copy of this committee's report that we...
The front letter?
Yes, our report that we made to the town meeting at the last town meeting, at the end of the fiscal year. And it's got to be here in one of these.
No, in last year's, I don't think it's in the town warrant, so we'll get you a copy of the town warrant.
It's in the town warrant, okay.
Right.
And then when you see the warrant, the printed warrant at the end for a town meeting, you can see what committees and what boards have recommended action and not recommended action. I think that'll be printed right in there, so that will be very instructive. So you will have then the whole chain, the last year's budget policy statement, of where the selectmen said, this is what we intend to do. You have the book in front of you that was given to you today. This is the adopted budget. Mm-hmm. So you can see how that came out. Mm-hmm. And then you can see how it got that way by looking at the report and the warrant. Okay.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So next, I'm going to do a short section on open meeting law. And this is there's a lot of material in this, but we can boil it down very simply. All deliberations of this board and any appointed or elected board are to be done in public open meetings. And so to make it, basically, to make it an open meeting means that people must know about it. It has to be posted in accordance with state law. And so there's a physical posting at Town Hall, which serves as the official sort of posting spot. It has to be a place open to the public. I recall at my first Finance Committee meeting in Town Hall, the door was open and there was a lot of commotion in the hallway, so I closed the door and they said, no, you can't close the door. I think that's a great metaphor for how this works. The door cannot be closed. We do have a provision for executive session, and basically, if it were something that could not be, made public, we've never invoked that. We've never had to. We put it in as a safety, really as kind of a safety mechanism before we agreed to televise the meetings, just to protect ourselves. We've never had to use it. I think the only time it could come up if, say, for example, the town manager was in negotiations with a large landholder in town who had a parcel that they wanted to sell, and he was saying, "These are this is how much I think we should spend for this." Some sort of negotiation thing that would put the town at a disadvantage. That would allow us to go into executive session. But then, as a matter of fact, after that, let's just play that one out. If we decided, okay, this was the realm of the negotiations, we would still take notes. We would still take minutes on that, and then after the decision had been made and the deal had been made or not made, we would publish those. We would publish those minutes as an addendum to the original minutes. So that's the open part of open meeting. The second part that's a little bit tricky is we live in a world with electronic media. I'd say mostly email and could include social media, but I don't think it has. Basically, we're not to use email as a tool for deliberations. So we can use it as a way to coordinate meetings. We can use it as a way to disseminate information. So for example, it would not be a violation of open meeting law to send an article from a publication around to the members of the committee to say, I found this interesting. So we don't have a discussion about it over email. We could have put it on the agenda and discuss it. And that, actually the agenda is an important part too. We are supposed to the extent possible, stick to our written agenda. So, and the idea behind that is that the public should know what we're going to discuss. And if they want to look at the agenda, which is posted, they should be able to look at the agenda and see what the topics of discussion are, and come to the meeting and offer public comment if they wish. We also have a public hearing every year before town meeting, in which we invite the public to come and speak. And so, we try to have maximum transparency. And so we have to be careful too, just in terms of interacting in what feels like a village at many times. We have to be careful about talking about official business in quorums outside of these meetings. So, even for example, for us to go out as a group and have dinner and talk about town business would be a violation of open meeting law, a serious violation. For us to go out to dinner and not talk about town business would be appropriate. That's not, specifically, we look through the open meeting law and that's specifically allowed.
And we have a lot of fun when we do that.
Right. Right.
We actually get to know each other's names.
Yes,
Right.
It's gonna be a long year, Tim. It's not even an hour in. You deserve that one. Everybody's gonna get their turn.
I'm really sorry, Julie.
Should we do a sock check?
And it's funny. I read. I'll disseminate this via email, not for deliberation. But there's a kind of compendium of state news that comes out every day that I read, and I'm amazed at how many violations of public meeting law, kind of come up in local papers, where citizens say you were talking about this, you met and you were talking about this, and you didn't follow these procedures. And, there's some pretty severe penalties levied by the Attorney General, who takes this very seriously. So that's the general idea of the open meeting law, that our deliberations are public and that they're advertised in advance, and that we allow whoever would like to come in to come into the meetings. We've always allowed for public comment. We haven't had to develop policies like some other boards that occasionally have lots of people looking for public comment, to basically say it has to be an item on the agenda and it has to be published in advance and so forth. But we generally have let the public come and speak whenever they would like. So any questions on the open meeting law? Okay, and Joyce will there are two things that Joyce Bradshaw, the town clerk, will seek you out for. One is the open meeting law certification of receipt of materials, which is at the back here. And then the second is the State Ethics Commission training, which is an online training which we complete, I think, every 2 years. That takes about a half an hour. And so you get an email from Joyce, and she'll say, go to this website and create a login and so forth, and do that. Okay. Any more questions on open meeting law? And I guess tangentially, we haven't really discussed this, but open meeting law does allow for remote participation in meetings to be governed by the authority in town, the rulemaking authority in town, which in our case is the Board of Selectmen. And so the North Andover Board of Selectmen have decided that we can have remote participation in meetings if you are able to see and be seen by the other members of the committee in some sort of like a Skype type situation. And you get one chance, basically, dial in. So if you dial in and you lose your signal or something, you're out. And you can participate in the meeting in terms of speaking, but you may not vote. So you do. No.
When did you do the Skype part?
Yeah.
I know the Skype, because that's sort of new to me. I knew you do the vocal, the audio, which doesn't work very well, but.
Right. Well, you're the one.
I did the
Yeah.
audio.
Yeah.
It's an audio thing. You can listen, you can participate, but you definitely cannot vote.
Yeah.
So, and it's a one-shot deal.
Right. And it's what, once per year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does it have to be arranged in advance, the
Yes.
audio?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't come in automatically having it every time?
Right. Right.
Okay. And as for Skype, we have no idea.
I know it's for sure audio, because that's how I called.
Right. We saw you too, though.
We did see you. Poor
Yeah, we
suffering
did.
man.
Yeah.
This wasn't
Yeah,
last
we
year,
did.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it was the year before.
It's the year before.
Yeah.
It's the main thing.
So,
Yeah.
Stuck with us.
Okay.
so it is nice that it is allowed. I think our committee might have been more open to expanded participation in meetings, but I think it's good that we have at least some.
Yeah.
People do.
Is that
travel.
allowed if that person is the deciding person on a quorum? Like, what if you're right
You
at a
don't count
quorum?
as a quorum, right?
Okay, so you can't. I thought that was one of the things, because if they drop off, then you suddenly don't have a quorum. So okay. I thought that was the case.
Okay. Next is the conflict of interest law. You can just take a quick look. Thomas made it to the training, and I did not. And so basically it's pretty simple. The general idea is that you never want to be voting on anything that's going to affect you or a member of your immediate family. And there are different ways of dealing with it. Part of it, so generally, you want to recuse yourself if you're deliberating on something which directly affects your family.
That family, the immediate family, has a couple of zingers in it.
Right.
It's your parents, both sets of parents.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're married, let's say, both sets of parents, and your kids, both, your children, but also your siblings. So, yeah, siblings on both sides.
Right.
Your brother-in-law, your sister, and so if you have a large family, you may not know everything that they're doing, but you have to be careful.
Right.
To see to what extent, that's all.
Right. There are also prohibitions against gifts. You can't accept gifts if the receipt would create the appearance that the public employee could be improperly influenced in the performance of their duty, unless a written disclosure is advised. And that's for less than $50. You can never accept more than $50 unless it's in relation to an official act. And so we will never have any official acts that, that will require any money. But the example would be like, if a town official were receiving an honorary degree and somebody, and their university agreed to pay their airfare, something like that, that would be in, pursuit of their public duties. And so, you have to be careful about that. And in general, the code of conduct, and you'll see through the training, is that you never want a reasonable person to be able to conclude that you or she might act with bias. Okay? So if you think there's an appearance of bias, you can seek help from the state. In some cases, you might file a disclosure. You might say, I could be considered biased in this particular situation, and let it up from there. You never want to use official resources for private or personal gain. We don't really have any resources, so it's really not a problem for the Finance Committee. I would say, too, that it would go to, how we approach and interact with town officials, that we do so in the role of a citizen when it affects us as a private individual. For example, I was at the football field and I found a junction box next to the lights. I'm going to get back to you. It'll make sense in a second. But basically, I didn't call the town DPW director and say, I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee, please come fix this. I went to the town website and there's a report it function, and I put in a ticket and I said, this junction box is not secured, so a child could open it up and get jacked or something like that. And so I guess I wouldn't have gained from that at all, but you shouldn't send an email and say, I'm having this dispute with my neighbor or something like that in your official capacity. We should be the same as every other citizen and approach town officials in the same way. And the only example of, I guess there's been a few issues where people have been conflicted, and the idea is when you are conflicted, when you have a conflict of interest, you disclose it, and then you are not permitted to be part of deliberations on that particular thing. So the best example that I can think of was Don Elliott, who stepped off last year, was a member of the Center Realty Trust, which is a board set up by the North Andover Historical Society, I believe, that manages some of their real estate. And there were occasions when they had come to the Community Preservation Committee for an appropriation. And so he did not participate in the Community Preservation Act expenditures whatsoever. So he didn't sit through the presentation, he didn't vote, and he didn't deliberate. So he removed himself from the situation, and so there was no appearance of conflict of interest.
He left the room.
Right. And so that's how he handled it, and that's sort of the best approach, I think, to take. And since, so those are the things that would usually come up in the Finance Committee, I believe, even more so than anything involving somebody's private business, is, a nonprofit that they may be associated with, which is funded by the town or something like that.
Even indirectly, there may be an appearance of conflict of interest. It's not as severe as the Don Elliott example, where there might be a game. I had a situation where I recused myself from the vote on the CPA Act because it affected me from a half mile down the street, the land development. And it's like, I didn't say much other than, but I didn't vote. I didn't have anything to gain really from it, one way or the other. I just didn't want the appearance.
All right, so that covers pretty much all the policies and procedures, unless there's anything anybody thinks that any committee member thinks we'd want to emphasize, or we may have neglected to mention?
Read the book. Actually, I think everyone who's come on board has done, I think we've gone through a lot of the good material here in that order. But one of the more important things is to get familiar with this book,
Right.
because it will come back to you. And one of the more interesting things for me as an analytical kind of guy is I compare this to prior years to see how things have changed year over year, and what has changed and why. You know, if you move the things of capital improvements out of order, and like what happened, and if there's not a discussion on it, one of us, or me, will bring it up. So it's a very important book to read. And then you didn't ask me to, but the organization.
Yeah, no, I'm going to ask you to do that. So
Okay.
hold on that for one. You're going to do that. That's item F. Do we have any proposed changes to the policies or rules and procedures? Anything we want to amend in our 3-page document?
Are we going to have any discussion on the 4th?
I'd like to keep it and actually
Yes,
not breach it.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Me too.
Thank you. I did not know that existed, and
Yeah.
I'm lucky for all of you.
Right.
I agree.
All right.
So we'll have it again.
Okay.
Uh,
And then I suppose if we don't have any changes of policy, proposed changes, then do we have any motions relative to the Finance Committee policies and procedures and whether or not they will serve us this term?
I move that we adopt the policies and procedures as written here.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. Tim is going to talk a little bit about the organization of the town and then how that funnels into how we get information from the town, because we're not able to produce our own sort of information about the town. We rely on it's a conversation we have with the town over the course of some months in the budgeting process, and we've set up based on the organization of the town, we've set up a mechanism to, of how we're going to funnel our requests. So Tim can talk about that.
It's not hard, but I think it is important to really recognize the organization of the town, with the citizens and the town meeting coming first, but also to emphasize that even though we're not an elected board, we're still, as Karen talked about, we're on stage and we're front and center, and therefore we have an important role of recommending actions on the town warrant and the budget in particular. The Board of Selectmen, clearly an important element of our elected officials, as well as the school committee, voted for and are serving under the vote of the people. I'm sure I don't have to remind people, but 2/3 of the budget is roughly on the school committee and 1/3 is in the rest of the municipal operations. I'm sorry, that's page 13 on the end of the budget packet. Following that, though, the general point person who actually facilitates pulling together the budget is the town manager under the direction of the Board of Selectmen. And from him, he has a process, Andrew in particular, has had a very well-oiled process that has worked, and he provides us that information. And in the last few years, a few years ago, it was provide that information. And so he'd be the point person, and he'd bring in a few people. Over the last couple of years, we've actually worked with him, and we'll talk about communication and getting answers to questions. We've worked with him to bring in the people who are actually responsible for those budgets, each of the department heads and other people. And last year in particular, we had those conversations with these department heads, and it was excellent. It was a good two-way conversation. We asked for their needs, what were their requirements, how do you feel? I asked, are you getting enough ammunition from a policeman? Because there was this is the change. There was a dip in the budget, and he explained why there was a dip. Great conversations with the senior center folks, librarians. It was a wonderful experience last year, and we're going to continue it, I believe. And it really was through the acts of our chairman, who, working with Andrew Mailer, convinced him to say, bring in the people. We want to hear the people. So what I'd like to do is suggest again is that we could go after Andrew directly, or Lynn Savage, who is an excellent accountant, CFO, financial analyst, But candidly, my thinking is that we still, if we have questions of Lynn, we had questions of any of the department heads, sort of push and facilitate that through both Bill and Jennifer to make sure that we're not all hammering from different angles those questions, those requests, that we're not asking the same thing of the same people. He facilitates, Jennifer facilitates, and by that means we get the information presented to us. I think it's that basic.
Yeah, and the town manager will direct the questions and vet them and, farm them out on the municipal side. And then on the school side, we can go to the superintendent and the chair of the school committee to kind of keep everybody in the loop.
There's next page afterwards are the key people in the department heads and their titles that you should become familiar with. And over the next few years, you'll get to know them as well as we all do here. And it's good to see them. And you know what? One of my takeaways from last year, hardworking, dedicated civil servants, really, all of them. I did emphasize the fact that the school department has got 2/3 of the budget. Jim Mealy, who's the Chief Operating Officer, if I forget his title, CFO?
Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations.
All right. So his title has changed, but in general, he's been the person behind the budget for the school department. He and Dr. Price worked with Andrew Mailer to really make sure that they're in line with what the budgets, what we can spend compared to what we're actually going to be receiving in revenues. And has worked very well, a little give and take, but in the end, it's a consensus budget, typically. I haven't seen a non-consensus budget since I've been on the board. But it has been working well. And I'm going to talk about the school committee, only because we just don't seem to have enough in-depth understanding of where all the money goes and everything else. It is 2/3 of our budget, and we spend a lot of time on the DPW. We spend a lot of time on the enterprise funds. We spend a lot of time, on the library, and it's just, that's good, but not enough time, in my opinion, on the school committee. So,
Well, and Stan is here.
Stan's great.
He is a liaison, you're right, with the school side of things. And from time to time, we have talked about having one of us do the same for the school committee meetings, but there's so many. I don't.
We get out from time to time.
so I look at
And
it.
there's 9 of you, that's only once every 9th school committee meeting.
Right.
1 out of 9, you gotta be able to handle that. I mean, that's like 1 a year almost.
Right. I think we should revisit this.
Oh, absolutely. And there are critical ones that we as Finance Committee should be there present for. And the example was, first one held this year. A few of us were there because we were talking about the philosophy and the principles of going forward in the coming school year, what they're looking at. One of the things that came up in that meeting, which was just published Friday in the weekly press, was the idea of having a single kindergarten school, like, what was the name of it? Bradstreet School was like. And there were a lot of positive things said about that. But what that really delved into was the master plan. The master plan for
Facility.
town, the master plan facility plan, and updating it. So it became even a broader kind of view of things. So that was an important meeting. There will be more important meetings as far as they're developing their budget policy, putting out their capital requirements, where they think they're going to be. One of the interesting things that's really becoming important this year is the population of the school, of the population of the town. And I can swear to that because down the street from me is Barry. And as my daughter has already picked up, that the school kids are already getting on the bus from there, and it just opened up. There's a lot of them already getting on the school bus, and there's nothing that's great. Our job is to educate them. But it's a matter of, do we have the facilities and the resources to make sure that we give them that proper education? So that's my take on things.
Right. And I'd say, too, there's some important, the most important meeting, I think, the entire year is the town manager's 5-year financial forecast. Because really more so than, well, I'm just going to be kind of biased, but I'm going to say more so than any other group, we're the ones who should be thinking 5 years ahead, because we're not up for election every every 2 years. Some of us will never run for election. And, you know, we bring that perspective of being able to look out and think about financial policies on a long-range horizon because
Can you remind me, because I don't remember, when he presented the 5-year, was it op, SIP, or both? Was it for the forecast?
So what he basically presents is to say, if we don't change anything, if I make certain assumptions about our revenues and certain assumptions about our expenditures,
Okay.
that these are going to grow at this percent and those are going to grow at this percent,
Yeah.
this is what the next 5 years look like.
Okay, so it's more operating.
Yeah,
not
it's
capital
operating.
improvement, it's
Yeah,
operating.
It's operating, and so the only aspect of the capital plan would be the debt service as, you know, as a
Right.
function of the year-over-year operating costs.
Okay.
So that's another big meeting, I would say.
I also love to champion, not personally, but I think involved with us, one of the more important and more interesting opportunities presented to, I think it's two FinCom members that attend,
Right.
to the Revenue Fixed Cost Review Committee. And that really says a lot, because then you can see Lynn Savage does a great job in an analysis of what the past looked like and what she's presenting for the future. And it's your assessment whether or not she's being overly aggressive with her projections or conservative. And generally, it's always conservative, but it gives you an insight about, you know, the how close the numbers have really come in to what she's been projecting revenue-wise, and it's fixed costs as well. So just an opportunity
Right.
for a couple of FinCom members to join.
Yeah, so I think since we've covered F, like we figured out the information requests, G is kind of daunting. Like, we can't really review the entire budget in a meeting. We can maybe speak to it towards the end, because it's, you know, obviously it's this big book. But the budget calendar and key milestones, I think, is worth taking a look at. So it's this FY18 budget calendar. So the important thing to note is it's a very long process. It starts in September and it ends up in May. And there are some important milestones. So as you can see, on Friday, the capital improvement plan instructions will be distributed out to the different departments, and people will make capital requests. I think our capital budgeting process is very robust. Every project follows the same format where there's justification, there's a cost estimates and so forth, and then they're ranked according to a hierarchy of kind of need later on in the process before they get recommended by the town manager. But you can see where the scores come out. Sometimes they change, and it's done for 5 years out. So we have an understanding of what projects are under consideration for the next 5 years. And not always, but for most of the major ones, so that we're anticipating that the DPW trucks will come to the end of their life, or that a fire truck will need to be replaced, or that the track will need to be resurfaced. Those things should all sort of be in the mix over a period, and, you know, theoretically, you can see projects sort of move up until they're funded. So that's a very robust process. And that comes from the departments, the school department, and all the other police, fire, et cetera. All those other departments submit those.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
On the 19th of December, the capital improvement plan is issued to the selectmen, and then the next day it is forwarded to us from the selectmen?
Right.
Or is it issued to selectmen and issued to us literally within 24 hours?
I believe, basically, what the way in which the Board of Selectmen have handled the budgets is they'll take the town manager's budget and they'll recommend it for deliberation. And so they'll hand it to us at the same time they're deliberating on it. So we're working on parallel paths at that point.
Okay.
But they could, if they desired to, they could say, it's, you know, it's not our budget yet, and we're not ready to have you deliberate upon it, if they didn't want to. So I think they might distribute it to us, but, they have their recommendation on the budget, which could be different from the
So
town man, or.
their questions on the capital improvement plan are directed to Andrew separately from our questions, which are directed to Andrew.
Right.
It's okay. I'm getting to the joint meeting idea. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay, got it. Thank you.
And then, heading back up again, as Tim talked about, the Revenue Fixed Cost Committee, starting in November, that is very important because we have had a consensus since we've had this committee on the number that we're starting the year with. And I think that's very important because there are only so many variables we can consider in a $100 million budget. And so by basically coming to a consensus about this is the size of the pie we have to divide up, in getting that out of the way, very early in the year, that helps us plan with much more certainty. And so we don't have the situation where one group of people says, no, the pie is actually bigger. We can have bigger slices of pie this year. That doesn't happen. We agree on what the numbers are going to be. We may disagree about how much should go into reserves versus operating, or capital versus operating, but we agree on the size of the pie, and that's very important, and is really, I think, helped our town plan effectively. And so we'll take 2 members for that. I'll talk about that a little bit later, and we can see who might be able to do it. Then basically, as we alluded to earlier, the 5-year forecast will come out around the same time, and around the October timeframe, the policy statement from the Board of Selectmen will come out in about a month. So say, early November. So we'll have an idea of what the Board of Selectmen priorities are for the year. And then in January, so if we start with the CIP, I should back up a little bit. We start with the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan, in December. And so, sometimes it takes somebody new to come in and ask some questions, but we have always considered the capital plan first and then the operating plan afterwards. And, there probably isn't a great reason because we do talk to a lot of the same people, but I think it's just a matter of the capital plan drives a line item in the operating budget, which is debt service. So if we're going to vary that budget, if we're going to vary the amount of debt service we're going to carry, then we should figure that out before we build the rest of the budget. As we were to do them both at the same time, it might be tricky because we'd be saying, oh no, we can't, we haven't decided on this project, therefore we don't know how much debt service we're going to carry, therefore we don't know what we're going to have left. So maybe that's the logic, although no one's ever explained it to me that way.
It sounds good, because last year I wasn't.
So I have a question. So recommended CIP forwarded to Finance Committee on December 20th. So at that point, what do we do?
At that point, we start to hold hearings. So basically what we do is, I shouldn't say hearings, but we start to hear presentations about the capital improvement plan. So we'll divide it up, usually 2 or 3 meetings on that, and what we'll say is we'll have a town manager come in with an overview. Sometimes we can put in, the people who usually come in front of us on that, like the DPW comes every year because they always have a capital requirements in terms of the water and sewer enterprise funds that the Department of Public Works is kind of interesting hybrid where there's a lot of people who do some work for the DPW and some work for the enterprise funds. And so we see those people a lot because they're asking for new filtration systems and things like that. We will see the school department. So they'll talk about usually at least about IT and maybe about some building projects and so forth. We'll see the town facility director. And then we may see other departments as if they have a particular requirement. So
those things happen in between, right?
Yes.
Right. So in December, in January, we'll start meeting with on the CIP.
By the time we get there, they've already got their recommended capital budget. They've got the gradings, the rankings of all these things. And when they come before us, it's really just to support and rationalize why this got pushed ahead at this one. And that's where we ask the questions. And there's always sometimes a return on investment kind of thinking as well, as far as is this a good bet right now, a good investment at this time. So we've seen things shift around.
Things get jammed up around holiday time.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I wrote a note. I'm going to get a list of all the meetings we had in the past that you guys coordinated and who attended, and then I'm going to write out an actual calendar. Bill knows this. I'm going to print it because I don't want to get it jammed up and miss somebody coming to present, or based on what we see, we may want to take that time more with the school and less with the town. If we only have limited time to meet.
I think
we need to plan a little bit ahead, because it felt very...
It is, and then you can get lost. You can chew up 3 weeks, right?
And then all of a sudden, we're like, we didn't have enough time on something else, and we can't get it in.
Yeah, good.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Wow, that would be quite a boon.
Right.
Look at that all in our...
We'll see. Well, if we want to have joint meetings, too.
Am I going
Yeah,
to miss
well,
a lot?
you know.
I am leaving for India for 2 weeks in December, from December 14th to December 31st.
Here's what I
No,
usually
it'll
do.
be
I'll ask
fine.
everybody what their vacation calendars are
Yep.
between now and the town meeting, if you already know. Like, I know in April
Yeah,
I'm
I
gone.
know that.
So I'll start to build a huge master calendar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 14th
Right.
to 31st.
Yeah,
Right. No,
that's really good.
That's usually fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we can all get that into our calendars.
That's right, we all have to
And then we
travel
can
during
plan our personal lives around that.
Yeah, and I will ask.
Rather than the other way.
I'll ask.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Jen has given us clearance.
And so we will in January, usually shortly after the selectmen vote on the capital improvement plan, it's sort of one segment, formally, just so that, we have our general consensus. And then you'll see the school department budget comes out in, say, February, January to February, and the operating budget comes out in February. And like I said, usually the Board of Selectmen will pass it right along to us so that we can start our deliberations in February on the operating budget. And that's usually the busiest time of year, is sort of February and March. Mm-hmm. February and March, to a certain extent April, but we're done a month before town meeting. So it's kind of nice. You do a lot of work, and then you sit around for a month until town meeting.
Is that what we did?
I
don't remember
think
that.
we did that right.
Well, we spent some time on the letter, but we had a couple weeks. No, we had to have the warrant in. No, we have to have the warrant letter in a month before
Yes,
town
yes.
meeting.
There is
So-
a break between the last kind of meeting and the town meeting, but before that, we're very busy.
Very busy, yeah. And so basically, if you look through the second part of the year, from February, we're voting on the capital plan, Community Preservation Committee, which is an interesting segment we can maybe talk about as a special topic at some point, because that's kind of a entirely separate group of funds raised through a separate funding mechanism and access through a separate appropriations method. It's not directed by the town manager. It's more driven from the bottom up by citizens and different groups in town, nonprofits, and sometimes some aspects of the town.
By the way, I don't know if anybody saw it, but in Globe North this weekend, there was a column about should the town adopt funds, preservation funds, and there was an interesting column side by side. So I haven't seen it. If you're not familiar with what the perception of what it does, not just what it does, it's very insightful, because there's a lot of communities that haven't used funds as effectively as we have, almost to the point of misuse, and it's really a critical tool of ours. So I agree with Bill that it's something that warrants a little bit of light, because it's really made a lot of, we've used it as a turbo to a lot of things, not just sort of as a patch or as a one-off. So But as I said, if you get a chance, peek back in at that point counterpoint this weekend. It was-
Yeah, interesting. I am not familiar with community preservation, what exactly it means.
So the state set up a mechanism by which it's called the Community Preservation Act. And basically what it does is it allows communities to put a surtax on their property tax. And so if you look at your tax bill, you can see it called out as a separate line item. I don't want to try to approximate the percentage exactly off the top of my head, but it's not a large percentage, but it's an additional surcharge on your property taxes. And that goes into a separate fund. And it can be used for three purposes. It can be used for open land / recreation land purposes. And, that's actually opened up a little bit. Originally, it was very sort of strict land preservation. You take a piece of land and you don't do anything to it. It's loosened up recently so that it could be used for more sort of active recreation type things like walking paths and so forth, in playgrounds and things like that. So that's one purpose. The other is historical preservation. So a town is used this to, like the Schofield Mills down by Sutton Street across from Artie's Corner is an example of a project that was funded. There have been a number of other, the Parson Barnard House barn was fixed with community preservation funds. And then the third is affordable housing. And so like the town has purchased properties and helped to fund a project at Stevens Crossing, right down the hill from us right here where we sit, to make those things happen. Every year, 10% of the funds must be either spent or targeted to be spent at some point against those items. And the funding mechanism is different because it doesn't, it's not controlled by the Board of Selectmen or the town manager or the Finance Committee. And it also has a matching component. So the match is varied in some of the early years, and this is why North Andover was smart to adopt it quickly, because we got some of the great matching years of all time. Matching has been about 40%, so the state will chip in, a percentage of what you put away. I believe what you spend, I have to, check my recollection on that. I'm not sure if you get the money just for putting it aside or if you actually get the money when you spend the money, but there are matching funds, and it's been as high as I think as 60% and as low as like high 30s or 40%.
I don't think you have to spend it.
Yeah.
I think you just get it for
You get it from
aside.
this. Yeah.
There's a significant balance
Right.
in that account because you don't have to spend all of it.
Right.
And
then
it's a tool.
Every town is mandated to establish a community preservation committee. So the community preservation committee, which basically hears the different submittals, and there's a submittal process that you can follow, and you can go in and submit. I want to put in a dog park, and I think it's going to cost this amount of money, and you go in front of the committee, and they can recommend it or not recommend it, and then town meeting votes to fund it or not to fund it. So the funding at the end, all the authority does evolve from town meeting, but the way in which the funds are raised is outside of the normal property tax thing, and the purposes of the use of the money is much more limited than general revenue funds that you could spend on, whatever is sort of legal and seen. You could spend it at library, you could spend it at schools, you could, spend it however the town saw fit. But these funds are very specific. So you couldn't fund a librarian with that. You couldn't fund the police department with it. You couldn't hire a teacher with it. But you could buy land, preserve a historic building, or build affordable housing. So they'll come out, and they'll come in front of us too, and we'll make recommendations. We can make reservations down to the project level on any of these things. So we don't have to vote yes to the whole capital budget or yes to the whole community preservation budget. We can, disaggregate those things. And then you'll see we have a public hearing. We vote on the budget April 5th. No later than April 13th, we have to submit our recommendation and report. And our report is kind of, sometimes we call it our letter, but that's basically where we say, this is how we view the fiscal situation of the town of North Andover. And we kind of go through and we explain what we did, we explain what's going well, what's not going well, what the risks are, what the opportunities are. It's been about, 8 pages or 9 pages in the past couple of years. And we submit that. That gets printed in the warrant at the front. We get kind of top billing on that. And then the warrant is produced and distributed, for town meeting. And there's, a month in between them, almost a month in between them. And then they have the town meeting where everything gets voted on, and then we take a few months off after that, so.
This is the first year, this past year is the first year you presented at the town meeting.
No, it was
fair?
it was the second year we presented.
I don't remember, okay.
Finance committee members, they've made recommendations, and the past 2 years, so 2 years ago, I presented with no visuals, just sort of a
Oh, okay, so maybe
monologue.
that's why I don't remember, because I'm visual.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then people said, could you put some of those numbers up on the screen so we can see them? So.
It got expanded.
Yes,
lately.
well, yeah, for us.
But it was the same
visual
5
only
minutes
people.
that Mark, ruthlessly enforces. I think he gave me an extra 35 seconds.
Did he? It's like a
so,
TED Talk.
Yeah. I did better than Hillary or
did
Donald
fine.
last night in terms of time limit.
Yeah.
And then we're done. So that's the budget calendar, but I think it's important to, kind of lay that out there because it really talks, if you look at the different dates and understand what we're doing at different times, you understand the work that we do and where we try to add value is, examining what's going on. I would say taking the long view, trying to make sure that, we hear from everybody. So a lot of times you can tease a little bit from this group and a little bit from that group. Like, hey, you're going to build all these new fields up at the middle school, but you also need these school buildings. What should you be doing? When should you figure out the fields versus the schools, things like that. So.
Can we question?
Oh yeah, we
yeah.
question people all the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we do.
Stan's laughing at me.
Right.
Oh, and we have a list of questions that we put together.
If I could see that, yeah, that would be very.
You
Oh,
would
we have the
like-
format for the PowerPoint we're talking about?
Right.
Well, remember we put together a list of each with the questions that we would like to have the committee.
I just fly by seeing my pants.
Yeah, okay, well, so you should see that.
Yeah.
List.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And some of this is really about, I think this background also helps because it's about the perspective of where you're coming from, right? And so, as Bill was saying earlier, we're in the position of really being able to look much more long-term. We're the party that's really most tied to the long term because we don't have to deal with the immediate decision of that budget, right? We have no real say over that budget. So it's really that we're kind of a conduit for information to the citizenry, but we also translate. And so as you go through these presentations, what I try and do, and I think what we are pretty effective doing here is doing that, is just trying to, how do we pull this all together as representing the citizenry? And what are the questions that we as citizens have about how our town is being managed financially and how these choices are made as they affect the budget? And so, coming in with that perspective, whether it be thinking about sustainability, whether it be thinking about efficiencies, those are sort of the questions, those are sort of the things in the background. So, we've got these specific questions. It's that driver of perspective that's really, really important. And you're going to figure out where that comes from yourself, because everybody here is all got our kind of, there's some folks that are running backs, there's some people that are wide receivers, it's the same sort of thing.
It would be an interesting thing. I am very, very excited.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion since
Sure.
we have a volunteer already who's going to break out a calendar? Could you also, Jennifer, add school committee meetings? I feel like I'm a nemesis of school committee, but I'm not. I really am interested in the information and being an advocate of school, but I know there's 2 meetings scheduled here. One is when they get the budget presented to them by the superintendent, and the other one where they have a public hearing on it. In between, Stan, I believe there's meetings to discuss the details of that budget, which if you put it on that calendar you're talking about,
Yeah.
that would highlight the importance of those meetings.
And that's the debate I have, is I can build a master calendar,
To be honest, of all three groups, but it's the question of what's on the agenda.
Right.
So I don't think that's been determined yet. So I'll draft it, and then we'll build from there.
Okay.
Because I think we could use that in future years, too. I don't think it'll be a lost effort.
We have the town calendar. So it's our-
Well, I'm just saying, I got to go to a lot of different
Other pieces,
places.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
just, okay.
But you don't have to post the agenda though until, you can wait.
Like
till-
the week or two
We
before.
have we've set an annual calendar for the school committee, which has topics. It's not the full agenda, but so for example, you can
You've
find out.
already booked out, like, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
unlike us.
we know at least
Yeah.
through the end of this calendar year what we'll generally be discussing at upcoming meetings. So you could find out that at one meeting, the principals will come and give their presentations. That might be a meeting you want to attend to hear what their sense of their school and the school district is. So those are examples. The full agenda is not set that far in advance.
but you have that all on one list, so I don't have to click on a link for
Yep.
each date?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I can get that. That's why I'm That's why.
The Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee, I think I could do that this year, that I have enough work from home flexibility, so, and I haven't done it yet, and I probably should.
Oh,
I'm interested, are you
All right.
interested too? But I want to
understand more, because she did
You
it.
need to do that. I've been on that
Yeah, I've been
committee.
on it
There
as
are
well.
3
I know.
meetings, and it's you cover a lot of material in every meeting. And they're just 3, you can't miss them. And then you're done. So, and it's usually during the day.
Would you have interest in doing it again? Because I could.
No.
Okay.
No, I think someone else who has not done it
Yeah,
should see.
I will speak for you. We and I were on the same committee at the
Yes.
same time.
Right.
And it was interesting, and yeah, I would be interested in it, but it's not right. You need to do it, Jennifer
Yes.
needs to do it.
Everyone
So
needs
everyone
to
needs have
know
a piece of it.
Okay.
where that coming from. Yeah.
Okay, but I already have
Or
something
Liz,
in my
I'm
mind. Yes, Liz or Chris or, okay, so at these meetings, we're only taking in information? We are not reacting?
Oh,
We're-
yes, you're reacting. Oh, absolutely. You are going through, start with with the tax coming in, what the real estate receipts are looking, the revenue looks like, and then you go through each category, each line item. How much do we expect to have from?
Businesses versus residential?
Yes.
All the detail is there, and it's a projection. And to back up the projection is, obviously, there's maximum you can have. Behind that, though, for example, dog license fees, or building
Permits.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, building
One of the more
permit fees.
important ones that I picked up on was the motor vehicle excise tax, because you could actually see in the spreadsheet information that Lynn Savage prepares where our economy across the country picked up, where people were buying new cars, and then VET went up. There was a spike there. It was an obvious spike about when it happened. And so it is great information. The fixed cost part is extremely important, because there's your gross revenue. You take away the fixed part, and that's what you got left to be spent. So,
And so each item then, she's got it listed out with the numbers, and then one of the columns says the basis of the projection. What is the basis? The last 5 years? The last 3 years? Is it predictable? Like, for instance, new growth. We tend to do 600,000. Yes, what?
Are you interested in going?
Sure. I got some travel, but hopefully we can, so let's plan on that. We'll plan on
Well, great.
Okay.
Yeah, so you haven't done that before.
that. I've done a lot of things, but
But he
that's one
hasn't
thing
done
I've never
that?
been accused of.
for anybody in this committee, you have to participate at least once.
Yeah.
I did it last year, it was very interesting.
I'll go to
Really
next year if
interesting.
Chris will do it this year.
Yeah, it sounds like it's really the integrity to the numbers that gives you confidence with what the rest of this is built on, right? I already noticed in here, Andrew was talking about the change he expects with automotive tax. Maybe we've seen a peak with that, so
Yeah.
that will be interesting.
And the other thing too is that you really do, I know we all have a good relationship with Andrew and Lynn, but you can get even a better working relationship
Yep.
with them in that meeting, so.
Mhm, yeah.
Well, that's a good idea. So,
Okay.
when will we know when those are going to be scheduled?
I will email Andrew and copy you and
Okay.
figure it out.
Soon.
I know it has to be, we have to start by the 4th of November.
You have to
Okay.
be done by a certain date.
Yeah, we have
It
to
has to be done by,
So it's like this year?
Yeah, we have to be done by the 19th of
4th to the
December.
19th.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
easy then.
You're not allowed to
So-
travel.
I can do that. No, that's fine.
Troublemaker
Yeah.
Chris.
No, that works great. That works great. Happy to do that. Yeah.
Okay. And
those
so,
meetings are in November. Excuse me.
and so, the next agenda item, we in some cases,
Do we have
Divya.
to vote on the members that go? Do we have to do a formal
Oh,
I don't
motion
think we ever
on
had,
who
but-
becomes? I don't know if we do or not, I can't remember.
I didn't think we did for you last year.
Yeah, I can't remember, that's.
I know,
just-
we
yeah.
just.
Just
well,
ask
wait a
Senator.
minute, I kind of think we do. When
You want 'em?
When you look at it, might as well.
practice
Well,
our
why not?
Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, so the,
Such a problem.
I motion. So wait a minute, do we start? I motion.
I hereby move that, Bill.
What's his name?
What's his name? There it is, Chris. Bill and Chris be our representatives on the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee for the budget cycle for fiscal year 2018.
Fair enough.
Nice second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous.
Thank you. I just second.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, of course,
she's not yelling.
I-
Yeah, give her one next meeting. We always wait quietly in the first and then we go.
Okay.
Can we go?
But is it necessary to be this formal for?
Yes.
Well, it helps with our,
You have to-
it helps
yeah.
with kind of record keeping and
Yeah.
having
She
a,
writes it all down.
yeah.
Yes,
So
first,
then it's all in the
second,
minutes.
and- yeah.
Which,
Form.
by the way, actually, we went through this whole process, and
Oh,
actually, you
that's right, we
forgot to
followed the
mention about
rules.
our fabulous minutes and how those actually work. Because Angela is quite the whiz, and we added a degree of difficulty last year, which is to sync up several things. So if we reference a document in here, Angela will identify that. And secondly, the time will be timestamped when we kind of hit a major topic. And the idea of this really came about, I remember one of you wizards came up with this.
It was me.
yes.
What's her name? Scott.
Yeah.
And it just makes it easier for the public, right, to be able to
Yes, to find-
It
identify
might be a
this.
2-hour recording and they don't know where to get to the topic.
So if there are documents and those sort of things going ahead that you want to reference or that are important, let Angela know.
right.
Poor Angela.
Okay.
Great.
And so this part of the year, we almost call like off cycle. So we don't have anything, like as you can see in the budget calendar, we don't have anything formally to do as of yet. So we've taken this time in a few years to examine areas and hear perspectives that we might not have. So last year, we had Andrew, who had previously served on the Essex County Retirement System Board, which is an acronym I can't get right. But basically, it's the retirement for all the municipal employees in North Andover. And what we found is it's not really in great shape, and therefore our expenditures towards that line item in our budget continue to go up while they're trying to fully fund the pension over 30 years, which they have been trying to balance for several years, but they keep having to restate their funding schedule because they're not hitting their return on investment. So we did a deep dive into that. We talked to a longtime taxpayer advocate in North Andover, Ted Tripp. He came in and gave kind of a presentation on his experience with town government that was pretty enlightening because it went back probably to predate many of our tenures in the town. We hadn't been in town as long as he has, and kind of looked at government that long. I'm trying to think So those are some of the things we've done off-cycle. Last year, we met the new superintendent. We had her, she asked to come in, or we arranged a time for her to come in and talk about, and just meet the committee and hear some of our concerns. Another thing we'll do probably is talk to the school department about special education costs, which are very volatile and usually can be identified by October, November-ish, if they're going to be greater than or lower than expected, because that always comes down, they can sometimes go down to the end of the year and trying to plug a gap in the school budget. And so this is more of an open sort of time. So I thought what we could do is come up with a few topics. We have 2 meetings scheduled in October. And if we came up with the topics, we could prepare some materials and then, talk about those things. So I'll throw it to the floor for suggestions.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Again, because I'm new, so I'll be asking maybe some hard questions.
That's the
So,
only
for
way to
example, if the school committee presents a requirement for a certain amount in the budget, and we feel that we can make certain suggestions to really not allocate from the existing funds that we have, but suggest some ways to generate certain funds for the school. Can we do that as members of the finance committee? For example, see, they have an X amount of budget requirement, and we feel that if they adopt certain things, or if they, for example, instead of asking kids to buy their supplies, beginning the new session, if they have a folder that the school gives out to the kids, and it has certain ads from the city businesses, so the folder is basically sponsored by these businesses, then the whole fund will be coming out of these businesses, and it will not really come out from the town budget. Can we make certain suggestions as members, or we do need to make suggestions as an ordinary citizen?
I would say that, generally we can, and something as specific as what you talked about, we would probably do it as a public citizen. Okay. But the school department is a little bit different, and it's a little bit different because of a education reform law passed in 1993, which basically really changed the nature of the relationship between the school department and the school superintendent and how schools run, and even schools in towns to a certain extent. So the school department is given an appropriation in sort of a lump sum, and it's up to the school committee and the school superintendent to spend those funds as they see fit. So while on the municipal side, we could say, raise that, lower that, don't spend that here, don't spend that there. We can't do that on the, we can recommend a lower budget, and we could say, so for example, we could theoretically say, you're asked for 40 million, and we're going to give you 39.5 million because that's all we have, or that's all we think you need. But we can't tell you how to spend the $39 million on the school department side. On the municipal side, we could be a little bit more granular about, we're going to adjust these line items to come up with this new number.
Yep. I think, though, that it was actually going towards a different thought here, and let me try to capsulize it, because I was actually involved in a subcommittee on the school committee, and that is alternative revenue sources.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, it's not so much dictating or asking the school committee to spend the money in a certain way. It is, what is the effort really to come up with alternative revenue sources?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it has to do with grant writing. But that I think is really the more
Yes.
logistic
Right.
question
Yes,
here.
yes, exactly.
And I think as a general topic, I'm not sure if we do enough. I just got a nod on a shake of the head there. And what we even do in town here for alternative revenue sources, because that could pay for a lot of things with some cost, grant writer cost, but it still could be a very favorable thing.
But doesn't that then fall under the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee?
Yes,
I'm
that's what I
just-
was going to say.
Because last year I did ask a lot of questions about revenue generation. Okay, I'm seeing the future, I don't know the numbers, but I know they're going to be big, right? So I did, and these guys kind of, I would say, coached me a little bit on when that was appropriate, and many times it was the Revenue and Fixed Committee where that should have come up, or I actually showed up as a public citizen to other committee or group meetings or whatever, so selectmen and school.
So
So you have to
I
kind of-
agree with you, but to the extent though that I'm looking long-term here as an effort, that yes, for our property taxes primarily, we give a certain amount of money, 2/3 to the school, 1/3 to the town. But outside of that, and that's really what I'm speaking of, is up beyond
Yeah.
that, which is outside of, and it's probably more for one-offs, because you can't say the property tax, that's a sustainable revenue, whereas grants are probably like one-offs. And I'll give you an example, there's perhaps a grant to buy more tablets. But that's the kind of thing that we, outside of the fixed revenue, the revenue of the fixed cost committee.
Well, then there's always the PTOs.
Yes.
For
Right, it's
instance,
the
and
question
that-
of where do you ask the question, how do you ask it?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think
Yeah.
what we're just saying is, you have the right thought, but he just asked the question the way we would ask it here, and to whom would be
Yeah.
who would be the
Right.
person
Yeah,
to ask it
yeah.
to?
The idea is, I think, in my way of thinking, is that you're planting more of a seed. I'm sure Dr. Price already has the seed, and it's already growing quite well about where to find alternative. But I'd like to continue that conversation, not so much to say this is what you need to do, or
Yeah,
a
exactly.
recommendation. It is, what is being done? We're curious, and how can we help you expand upon that? People on this committee have expertise, and maybe they could even help out in that area.
So let me suggest, so this to me comes under somewhere between blue sky and what is possible. And some of these things, as you've already touched on, could reach across departments. I think that's one thing that we recognized last year is you see these sort of things like, geez, maybe these could be connected in a way, right? As we saw, for instance, with library resources for the town, for the schools. That's an easy one. But there are others. So let me suggest that there may be I could see sort of three things that we could investigate. One is revenue sources. So who would be the parties that we would invite or could invite to help us understand what the scope is and maybe ignite some of that discussion, some of that
Planning
thought.
going on,
Right.
absolutely.
So that's one. Green, green whatever you want to call it, environmentalism, efficiencies. Obviously we have something in place with the ESCO, right?
Yeah.
But are there other things? I don't know. Again, green would be the other. And the last one, which is pretty amazing, we're almost here an hour and 45 minutes. The new town master plan. To me, that really would be the starting point for us, which is, so we were sitting down 6 months ago. We hit the go button,
Yeah.
right? We paid for a consultant. Where are we?
Right.
Where are we going?
Agree.
Well-
Tell me because I think a lot of this stuff could fit in there,
Yes.
right? But that's who I would love us to start with, which is, hey, where are we going? Let's talk about how we gonna fit into that.
I agree.
We're
Excellent.
rolling.
I agree.
And that's
Wonderful. Yep.
I mean,
Mhm.
I would propose that the first or the next meeting, because I know I'm the one who kind of asked for the next meeting too, to have one extra, by me. I don't know if it's Eric and Andrew to start with on revenue sources and planning, which kind of plays into the town master plan, so we could cover two in one.
Well, should
And
that be
start
Lynn?
that well before the revenue.
Right, should that be Lynn Savage who would come?
I don't think she does
Well, I
the
don't think
sources
it's-
and
yeah.
planning. She's,
Well, revenues,
the-
so, yeah, town revenues.
no, I don't want to know where the sources are now, I can read that. I want to know about the planning for future revenue sources.
All
And
right.
that's a business economic development / town manager, but you guys would know better. I'm just thinking that's the next meeting.
Yeah, no, I'll send them a note and just see if they could be available on the 12th.
I know, it's so soon, and I think it's good to have that before the revenue fixed costs come
Yeah.
to play.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Now, what do you mean by green? Like, who would be green then? Is that still Eric? Because it's, or the planning and zoning? Whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, I still think there are tie-ins that potentially here. You know, we keep thinking in terms of buildings, but remember, it's people that are executing
Yeah.
within the facilities.
Yes.
And so, are there programs, are there initiatives that are outside of facilities that could help us with this? Again, that's in a way addressing revenue from the other side of the ledger. I don't know, just, you know, we're
Yeah, but no, but
spitballing
is there
here.
like a person in charge, who would be in charge of that, or who
Well, I
is
think it would,
thinking
I think
about it?
any initiative would probably be funneled, I mean, we'd start with Inder anyway, so we could ask
We
him,
could
are
bring it
there
up in
any
minutes.
sort of
Yeah.
sustainability initiatives that we think would,
What's with solar?
Yeah, well, that's-
Right.
Yeah, all that.
I know that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's back to the
All
energy
that.
grid, which is, yeah.
I mean, by title, you know, you've got a community and economic development.
Who comes to
You
talk
know what
about?
I'm saying? I mean, this is, and
But
public
he's
works.
saying, basically, ask Andrew, and then he'll tell us.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Who should be there?
We'll Sort that out. Cool.
Okay,
okay.
wow.
So that sounds like two topics under one theme.
But what if they can't come to the October 12th? Because it's too soon. 15th, I'm sorry.
50, I didn't know it was that week. Yeah,
October 18th.
the 18th.
10/8.
Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right, it's my first time in the senior center.
Yeah. So we can ask and we can see, it's,
Okay.
you know, 3+ weeks away, so maybe we can arrange it, but we'll ask.
And if they can't, do we have?
And then-
Second October meeting, that's what I'm
Second
saying, the
October
first one,
meeting.
it was an extra that I asked to add.
Right, and then we can
to be
figure
more
out,
proactive
if
here.
we're not gonna do that, do we have other things that we
Right, if we don't,
would want to do, or do we want to, I mean,
18th, right?
I've always, in putting together, tried side of over-scheduling meetings, so we
Right.
have the, you know,
right,
so
we
we
have
have
the
the
facilities,
resource, and we
location, yeah.
can handle the posting and everything early, and then if we need to cancel it, you know, a week before, it's fine, because
Mm-hmm.
there's no harm in, you know, announcing a meeting and then taking it off
I
the calendar.
agree.
There's only harm
I'd
if we-
rather do that than.
Yeah.
Being prepared, or it's still
Consultant's been hired to start
start?
Yeah.
Okay.
thinking about the master plan and how to develop it.
That's my
Is that
background.
fair?
Really, master planning?
Yes,
No.
I have city planning background.
Oh, wow.
Masters in city
Yeah, that
planning.
came up last time.
That's
which is
right,
when I-
right, right.
There we go.
Of course.
Of
We knew
course,
that.
that would make
Yeah.
total sense. The session is uptown.
Okay. So, should we proceed on that basis then? We'll try to see who's available on either of those meetings. Maybe we can do it in 2 meetings, one topic in each meeting, and maybe we can't.
We can get them both together.
Is there anything else that we, my only other thought would be,
We gotta get
you know,
it
what
done.
are our 4 horsemen? Like, what are the, you know, what are the things, if you look at it, and, you know, I put together last year, going back to 2009, sort of line item by line item, you can see how each thing has kind of gone up, which, to me, from an analytic perspective, was kind of useful to say, like, what's really growing? You know, what if you go back to 2009 and you compare it to now? Obviously, we're spending more money, but the shape,
What is
Beyond
affecting the-
inflation, what is?
yeah, what's growing faster than inflation? What's growing slower? What's, you know,
Analysis,
what-
comparative analysis.
right, comparative analysis, and, you know, it brings up a number of things. You know, we've spent a lot of time talking about other post-employment benefits and their effect on the town budget, but, you know, we can keep talking, and
Why don't we, on one of these next meetings coming up, redistribute that sheet.
Okay.
And,
Look for the trends
yeah,
and be proactive about what could.
yep.
I also do think we need to have, I don't want to tax Dr. Price. She's going to be in a lot of meetings this year, so I think we want to be cautious of that, but I also think we need to get her in here. I mean, I know we went to that meeting where she presented 11 initiatives, which are all big. They're all big. I think we need, I guess what I'm concerned about myself is coming into December and then hearing the numbers then.
That.
No. And will she, by, let's just say, late October, our late October meeting, have those prioritized? I don't think so. I didn't get the impression she would yet, because that consultant that was brought in for the bread, right? That's too soon, right?
Yeah.
I know. Okay, never mind for October.
Okay.
Maybe I'll find a meeting on their agenda that we could go to in lieu of one of our meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? So in terms of topics, I think we have 3 topics for the next 2 meetings, and we'll try to schedule them as best we can. One is green initiatives or sustainability initiatives, and the third is the town master plan. So we'll see how the pieces come together and what we can do. I'll send out an email tomorrow, and we'll let we'll try to get the agendas done as quickly as possible so that we can do that. So
one of the things that's not quite picked upon, but I like what Jen mentioned relative to going to a school committee meeting is basically asking the question, the public part of it, what is the school committee and the superintendent doing about alternative revenue sources? I would be very specific about that because she's looking for money and I'm interested in knowing how she's going to get that money.
Yeah.
So maybe the better forum is really within the school committee itself.
With letting them, I think in all fairness, letting them know in advance, we might come with that
Absolutely.
question. I don't think that's
It's just going to be a question that can stand. if you-
we're not just showing.
Just like I'll say, it's an interest of Tim Sugarhart and FinCom and.
People may be coming to ask this question, so we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason isn't so much that you're not doing anything, it is what more can be done and how can we help. Okay.
okay. Any other new business?
Is this one public comment?
Sure. Public comment.
Say I wouldn't report as we still.
Let me just make this is going to sound a little facetious. I would respectfully suggest that you add explicitly public comment to your agendas. You know, you rarely get public because I'm usually it, right? But I think it's just it gives the right optical view of, that you're open to it and you would accept it. You could put it anywhere on the agenda you want, beginning, end. It doesn't make any difference, but I think it's just an appropriate gesture to let the public know, yeah, we would accept some input from you if you came, just saying, so I think that's a good thing to do. The other thing I'd like to also go back to is something you said, Karen, in your policy about, I would call it the by-board meeting. I would respectfully submit that your newly elected chair might reach out to the chairs of the other 2 committees in town and try to set up a tri-board meeting along that exact line early in the year to discuss fiscal matters and future outlooks for the town. And it'd be a great opportunity to try to get everybody in the same room and start to talk about everybody's ideas on master planning. So I think that's something we've tried to do and have failed. I happen to believe now that we have maybe 3 chairs of the committees that might be more open to that than other groups have been in the past. So I would respectfully submit that you might want to give that a try and see how far you get with it this time. You never know. It might go better. And, it'd be a good opportunity to at least try to get all the boards together in a room if you can. The topic that I would suggest adding to your free play time here, the research time, is looking at the use of our borrowing capacity. right, we will have now some further latitude in our debt service capability as we roll off the debt exclusion overrides that we've had in place for a long time now. And as Mr. Shearhart has pointed out, there have been suggestions about how we might even spend that money already, right? So, you know, if we're talking about continuing the process that the town manager has been using so successfully for the last few years, which is self-funding a lot of facility development, which has just gone famously, this might be another project, but it might be the most aggressive project yet of all the ones that we've tried. So it might be a place where we have to really look at the financing of the financial possibilities for that, and you would be the perfect group to be able to do that. So I would respectfully submit that that might be something you might want to just think about, is how do we use our borrowing capacity as we get some headroom below 5%. What do we do with that? And, you know, as people have always said, you know, money's as cheap now as it's ever going to be. So if we were going to borrow money, and that would be the time to do it. So
AAA rating now.
something. So yeah, and
Two wins.
our options is the very best. I just wanted to make one comment about the revenue and fixed cost activity. Prior to our current town manager, that estimate was always so conservative that it just created enormous anguish in the budgeting process. You know, it was basically about, we'd start out at about half the actual, where we'd end up more or less. So it was a crazy exercise. I have to applaud the town manager for using that forum, that platform to give us, I think, a realistic budget to start out with for our budgeting process, and it's just saved us a ton of time and energy in terms of, you know, really being able to put together a realistic budget without having to play budget poker at the end with the town manager and all of that, the gamesmanship we used to have to go through. So I just think that's a wonderful, wonderful change that's come about, and it's made life so much easier for the school department in terms of building budgets.
Jill and Chris and Bill, it is interesting when they do footnote where they have to be considerate because there is too great a risk of volatility. But by the same token, they say we know what these numbers are going to be, and we can pretty much bank on them.
Right.
So there's definitely a good balance of that portfolio that they're putting together for our overall town revenue for the coming year. So
The only other issue that I would mention that you all could give some thought to if you were interested would be, as you again point out, Mr. Shearhart, the operating rule we've used, past practice rule of the 1/3, 2/3 split, right? As you've heard, the superintendent has mentioned that she feels, based on our per pupil spending number in the public schools, more revenue, more expenditures might be appropriate there. And that would be one way to go about doing that, would be to move that line. And it wouldn't take much to make a noticeable difference. So that's something that could be discussed by all of you. And it would really mean looking at across the board, you know, schools, the municipal side. What do we have? What are we spending? What do we need? What are the requirements? You know, what's our performance? All of that, and say maybe there could be some other mix. So that would be another interesting topic of discussion. So,
sure.
There's a philosophical component to that too, which is these are all really investments, and so it's like, you know, how much do you want to sign that free agent quarterback for?
Right.
You don't know what the potential return is.
Right.
And that's the same thing. We can ask these questions, I think, in a general forum here to say,
Right.
you know, if we make this investment, what return? How would we measure that return? What are some of those things? So that's one thing we haven't done in the past couple of years, is had that sort of theoretical discussion, because it's always been pulled back to earth with these numbers here. But we're really in a place where, you know, Mr. Mailer has put us, especially the 5-year projections, where we can step away from that discussion and not lose track of what we're doing today. I think that would be a really good meeting to have, which is, say, let's just unstrap ourselves from that and look at that. And I think that's a fair point.
The other major change with our current town manager has been him really embracing the idea of one town.
Yeah.
You know, that we're all in this together. It's not like municipal on one side and schools on the other. We're all together in this. So I think that's been also a dramatically changed atmosphere in which we can try to think about these sorts of things. You know, even as recently as 5 years ago, we couldn't have even thought about having a discussion like that. It would have gotten us nowhere. So anyway, all good things to think about.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay. We have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
All in favor?
I'm just guessing.
And we all agree.